Here's your heads up to this. Well, it's not terribly long, but it's not short. It's a nice little podcast, and it's inspired by a guy called Scott Adams of Dilbert fame. But it's all about intuition. Does it work? Doesn't it work? We're going to go through this very thoughtfully. But when we've been thoughtful and we decide to choose wisely, the whole world is going to open up to you. I promise. Have a listen.
Warning.
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 Warning. You are entering into the unplugged mind of Paul Clough. Too late. Personal Development Unplugged.
Hey, my little unplugger. How you doing? I'm good. I think I'm pretty good at the moment. Let's see if I can keep that up all the way through. But this podcast today is all about intuition doesn't work. What a title, Cluffy. I'm going to talk about it in real depth, but it came to me a little bit where we should consider that statement, intuition doesn't work. And this came to me from a guy called Scott Adams. If you don't know him, you'll probably have heard of him or seen his work from the Dilbert comic. Another thing he's a hypnotist, so that makes him a blooming good bloke. I don't know why, but I'm sure he's a blooming good bloke. He sounds like a blooming good bloke anyway. I like him. I like the sound of him. Anyway, you're going to be thinking, and you're going to be asking me, how the hell can you say intuition doesn't work, Cluffy, when all you talk about is going on the inside and listening to yourself? And if we go to those old 5 keys to success, where we take massive intuitive action. Now, you see, it's blooming old Scott Adams' fault to get me thinking about this, to muse. You know that lovely word we muse? I just wanted to think it over a bit, because he said a few things that made me think. But here's the thing. Here's what made me think about it too. Have you ever taken some intuitive action and regretted it? Now, normally, I don't know if I said this before, but it's a great thing. We very generally don't regret, or no, we'll start again. We generally regret what we haven't done. We don't normally regret what we have done, but generally we always, the things we haven't done, we'll regret not having done them. But there's one or two things in my life that I know that I've been impulsive, and regret, big word. Well, it's not that big, but I don't know whether that's the right word, but certainly I wasn't happy or I wasn't fulfilled by the outcome. I mean, I've had wonderful intuition about creating a book of wishes where we use the law of attraction, but write it down in a special way. And it's a great book. It is a great book. And I've got most of them still in my garage because that's where they are. Because it never really got further than that. It got a great domain name to go with it. I jumped at it. It was called Create Your Dreams. createyourdreams.co.uk. Awesome title. Awesome. And I got this book, Create Your Dreams book. That's what it was. And it was such a great thing to do. Now, there was something which we'll talk about later of an outcome about that. But at the time, I thought that was awesome. But it wasn't the best thing to do, but it wasn't necessarily the worst. It gave me something to think about, and that's what we're going to talk about later. But there was another time where I had this thing about relationships and working with people specifically about their relationship, whether it was about their work or their one-to-one romantic relationship or whatever. And I can't remember the domain name now, but it was an absolutely kick-ass domain name. And I bought it that quickly. And I threw up a website, and I've got hearts, and I've got this, and I've got that. And do you know what? I even renewed it once. And I thought it was a lovely looking website. And I knew that the things that everyone needed it. Well, basically everyone needed it. And they, in their droves, went past it and missed it. You see, what else? What else have we done? Can you think of something? Something that you've done intuitively. And I won't say regret it, but it wasn't probably the wisest thing you did. But at that time, it was the dog's bees. You see, I was listening to this guy, Scott Adams, and he was talking about maybe what you're listening to, that's that bit inside. Listen to the right you. Are you listening to the real you, the right you? Or, and this is where it got me, or could it be your ego talking to you? Because it's either the ego or the thoughtful you. Now, I think when it came down to the create your dreams, it was more thoughtful than ego, but there was a bit of ego there. But on the relationship one, I think it was all ego. I just knew I was the man to do it. And yeah, that's why people bypassed it in their droves. But at the time, I was 100% in. I put so much effort into that blooming thing. And there we go. It's now floating in the ether somewhere. Someone else will pick it up, I know. But you see, I think sometimes we need to think about this thing, to listen. And Scott Adams got me thinking about this way of listening, to make sure that it's not just ego talking to you, but it could well be the thoughtful you. And if it's a thoughtful you, maybe we need to use that massive intuitive action. But the thing is, I think for me, the ego bit says, oh, it's good for me. That's what this equals. If there was a calculation, it goes ego equals good for me. ... nothing. In fact, I've just written with a little smiley face under the two O's in good with the little I's and things like that. Good for me, exclamation mark. Nothing else happens. It misses two very important parts of that equation. Because it's always got to be good for you. Because if it's not good for you, you wouldn't. Well, it's no value to you, is it? But it's also got to have good for others, people around you. Doesn't matter how close, how far, but for other people. And also, little old planet Earth. We like to think about little old planet Earth, and I don't think we always do. So, what I got, I'm going to say that again. What I got from this little sentence or two that Scott Adams was saying, you have to question yourself. And it's good to question yourself. It's also good to take that dynamic, intuitive, massive action. But after, I don't like using the word but, and after you've questioned yourself, to get a little bit thoughtful maybe, to muse it. We go back to musing. You see, my meta view of all of this was, it's good to just step back for a moment. Just for a moment. Because everything we do, we're going to take responsibility for, aren't we? Because everything we've ever done, we've talked about it before, we were responsible for the choices we made, consciously and mostly unconsciously. So if we're going to choose, what's the best way to choose? Well, I have a feeling it's the wisely choice that we want. We want to choose wisely. So thoughtful, question ourselves, muse a little bit, take a little step backward, not backward, little step back. That meta view, as if you're looking down upon this thing. And having mused and having become a little bit thoughtful, we can choose wisely. So, this thing about intuition doesn't work. Well, it doesn't if it's only for ego. That's 100% fact. I don't know where I got that fact from, but it came out of my head. Because ego, as I said, is only good for me. And that's no good to anything. So what I'm really saying is, because I'm not really saying intuition doesn't work, because it bloody well does. But I think it's that old thing. We need to pause. I think maybe you could just pause for a few minutes to think it through. But Scott's advice was, just wait 24 hours. And I think it's really good advice, by the way. Wait 24 hours. And if that intuition is still there, now you can start to really get thoughtful about it. Because it's probably going to be that thoughtful you. Because it's still there. Because the ego, if it's not taken up just like that, boom, we'll find something else that will get us that instant gratification for us. But if that thought, that idea is still there 24 hours later, hopefully you've made a note about it, because if you didn't make a note about it, it'd probably disappear anyway. We've talked about that before. But if it's still there after 24 hours, we go, could be something we've got to think a little bit more, just a little bit more thoughtful. Because I think we need to ask, what is the intention? What's the intention for having this thought, for doing this behavior, for executing this plan? And the thing is, we need to get that why. We've talked about the why before, the value, what's important to you. Because when you really understand the importance, the big why, then you'll know whether it's something egotistical or the thoughtful you. Because that why may just be the things that are going to suit and serve you, which in self-sovereignty terms, and we'll talk about that later a little bit, doesn't cut the mustard, if that's a term. Because self-sovereignty is how we look at ourselves and everyone else. Self-service, selfless service. And we have to be honest, because even with that ego bit there, we can, try to convince ourselves that it's right, that it's still a good thing to do. But when you're slightly not as honest, trying to manipulate it, you bloody well know it, don't you? We've talked about that alignment, that, being congruent. You got that slight feeling, that unedged feeling, or the edgy feeling. You know that's not right. And if it isn't that, park the bloody thing. It might change later. It might change later when you think about it more deeply. But at the moment, just park it. Because you see, what we have to do is, and I talk about this on the 5 keys to success. Obviously, the first key is know your outcome. So it's that thought, that idea, maybe, and why it's important to you and what the outcome is. And then I say step 2 is take massive intuitive action. But Paul, you just said intuition doesn't work. Yeah, it does work if you know your outcome. You see, because if you know what your outcome is, what the why is, and you make sure it's good for self, which is obvious, but it doesn't miss out those others. So it's got to be good for self, got to be good for other people, other things around you, and, little old planet Earth. The NLP presupposition means every change has to be ecological, good for self, good for others, good for little old planet Earth. All change must be ecological. So when you know your outcome, and you have to be thoughtful about this, does it meet that criteria? Good for self, good for others, good for planet Earth. Is it totally ecological? If it is, might be something that you can then start to plan and take that massive intuitive action. Because you have to take action. You might as well if you're going to take action and you're sure about it, why not take massive intuitive action? Because you're sure about it now. Because it's ecological. And you see, if you think, actually, this is still ego. And I said park it for a little while. This is my thought about parking it. We think it's ego-driven. Therefore, it's only good for self. But you've still got that little feeling that there might be something there. So we've parked it. Now, when we park it, we might want to come back to it and just have a little think. Well, if I did do this, can I serve others? And can I, if I did serve others, and we should do this all the time, I think, not should, but sort of should all over us. But I think when we serve other people, like that self-sovereignty, selfless service, it should be done quietly. We don't have to tell the world what we're doing in that manner, that selfless service. We just do it because it's there. But the thing about it is, when you've gone through this process, there's a big but. And I hate buts. I hate a but because a but always, takes away the stuff before it. But this is the sort of but. The but is don't take too long. Because sometimes if it takes too long, it disappears. Because it isn't intuitive anymore, is it? I'm not sure. Maybe that's because you're not sure, so you should have parked it even further. But if you are sure, we take that massive intuitive action, we follow those 5 keys to success, because it becomes thoughtful intuitive action. TIA. Thoughtful intuitive action. And what does that do? It becomes growth, doesn't it? That's our growth, and it's growth for us, growth for other people, and protecting this little old planet Earth. Earth, Paul, get your teeth in. Now, the thing about this is, also, I made a little note about those times when certainly I've taken that massive intuitive action and they didn't work out. Now, the one about relationships, I just think I was on a roll of doing stuff for me. It was just something else I could add to. Look at me, look at me, look at me, look at I've got all these domains. And that's why it didn't work. It wasn't good for, well, it's sort of good for others, but it was mainly because of me. The thing is, was there anything to learn about that? Only that it wasn't good, it wasn't totally ecological. But the thing about the other one, the createyourdreams.com or .co.uk and this lovely Create Your Dreams book, okay, it may not have been that successful. But the thing is, was it good for me? Yeah, it was. It was good for me because it was a hell of a good project to go through. I actually went through the project of not only recording the ins and outs of how to use the book, but also various recordings about letting go of beliefs, becoming creative and things like that, and also mind mapping. It made me think of how I could distill the law of attraction onto 2 very simple pages with just 2 headings at the top and a little instruction, and that was it. That was a whole book. It took 3 pages at the front to describe it, and the rest of it was just 2 pages upon 2 pages upon 2 pages for about 100 lots of 2 pages. But then I had to learn how to get a cover designed, and that's where I found different people who could do designs. And then I also found who could print books for me, who could print books and what format they took, what size they took, making sure that if I sent this document to somebody, it would be the same amount of pages at the end that they got that what I was looking at. So I learned so much about just the process of producing this book. I had great fun doing it, so it was really good for me. There are some people who have bought that book, so it wasn't a complete unsuccess. But there are other things. I gave copies to quite a few people, in fact. So that was good for others, wasn't it? Because we would work on as a client and therapist. I'd say, please take this as well. Use this to fulfill your dreams. It's a lovely thing to do. And it's got a yellow cover, which is always a good thing for me. I'd buy any book with a yellow cover. But that was just me putting my yellow bit in. But it gave me a lot. Now, I've learned from that. And I think if I had gone through a little bit more about the 5 keys to success and been a bit more thoughtful, mused it over a little bit, I would have made better choices. And I would have I take responsibility for all that, but I would probably done it a slightly different way. I'm still very keen on doing something around that Create Your Dreams, because I think it's such a wonderful thing to do. And if you remember, it's like my dream is to create a dream for somebody else. So that's got to be good for others, isn't it? And if they're nice dreams and they're ecological dreams, they'll be good for planet Earth. So all in all, that one, I don't want to forget. It just was a project that wasn't quite right for the time, but it was right for the time for my learnings. And that's the whole thing. If we don't learn from these, waste of time doing it at all, isn't it? We have to learn from those experiences, because those learnings, when we come to have a look at these new intuitions, we can put those learnings into practice. And therefore, when we do decide this is an ecological thing, it's from my thoughtful self. When I take that massive intuitive action on this thing that I've got from my thoughtful place and my thoughtful me, I've got more learnings to make it more successful this time. And because of that, what happens? I've taken responsibility, I've grown, because we said thoughtful intuitive action equals growth. So I'm growing, I'm continuing to grow by keeping those learnings and doing new things. And because of that, I'm empowered. And that's that's where we want to be, isn't it? To be empowered. Empowered to do good stuff, selfless service. And even though sometimes they don't always work out, it was something that came from my thoughtful self, I think, more that way to get me to learn something. So I wonder, this is my question, have you learnt from the things that you took intuitive action on? The ones that didn't work and the ones that did work? Because we have to learn from both. I mean, it's no good just learning from the things that didn't work. We've got to add that to the learnings that we get from the things that did work. So we put them all together. And the other thing I wanted is is more of a reminder to me, I guess, but I'd like you to remember it, is when you get that call, We don't know if it's a calling yet, but it's a call. And we're not sure whether it's the ego talking to us or our thoughtful selves. Maybe we set up and schedule 24 hours later. We're going to muse about this and we're going to be honest. We're going to find out our intention. We're going to find out our whys. And then, if it passes that test, that ecological test, and we've still got massive motivation because of those whys, then we're going to take that massive intuitive action and make a difference to this world. There you go. Not the longest podcast in the world, but more of a thoughtful one, I think. Certainly it was for me, from thinking how I could explain it to you, thinking about the things that's gone on in my life and trying to make some type of sense out of them. Because until I started to think about this and finding the examples in my life, I didn't realize of the learnings I got from it. Because sometimes we don't. We just put it to experience. Well, what's the point of putting it to experience if we're not going to learn from that experience? And maybe there's a story there for somebody too. And by sharing those stories, the stories that didn't work and the stories that did, be a little bit vulnerable, put yourself out there, then everyone gets to learn. And maybe as you share that story, the person you're sharing it with comes up and says, but what if? And you go, that's it. That's the missing key. Unpark the car, or that idea, put it into drive. Now here we go. And that's that integrated field of learning working at its best, where you share and you get something back. Anyway, I hope, as usual, this had a modicum of sense in it. And even if you just consider it, that's all I'm going to ask you to do. Consider what I've spoken about. I'm thinking about it even more now because I'm doing some other stuff. And each time I thought of one thing and I can't remember. I didn't deliberately park it for 24 hours and say, I'm going to wait. But it was like an unconscious choice to say, well, I'll come back to this tomorrow. I'll play around with a few notes. And then I put those notes aside. And then I rewrote the notes again to see if I could make more sense. And then what I've done is I've emailed my idea to two of my sons and said, firstly, what do you reckon? Is this a flyer? Does it go? And also, what don't I need and what do I need more of? So is there something to strip away or is there something to add, something important that I've missed? And then we'll think about it again. So it's all about step by step, baby steps as it were, because I'm passionate about this little project I've got. And I could go 110, 20 mile an hour, but I could go the wrong direction, or I could miss something out, or a little bit like that relationship site, just let it fade and die. But I'm not. I'm just being thoughtful of it, because when I take responsibility for the action this time, if it flies, it is going to soar. I know that. It will soar. And I really know that it's really good for me, because it'll make me feel really good to do to carry out that project. But it's all about helping other people. And if I'm going to help people with what it does, little old planet Earth is going to get better for that. So it is totally ecological. So I know all of that. So I think it is totally from my thoughtful self, but I'm not going to go 100 mile an hour just yet. But when I do, pedal to the metal, or metal to the pedal, whatever that saying is, I am going to accelerate and do things wisely and thoughtful, take total responsibility for it, and do everything from the 5 keys to success. So I'm going to be aware of what's happening. I'm going to be flexible to make sure I can negotiate the way, keeping that big picture in mind while I take all the little steps. And I'm going to use that psychology and physiology of excellence, because I know what it is. But I'm not going to rush, because I'm being thoughtful and museful. So I wonder, final question, if this makes a little bit of modicum of sense, if you do get some intuitions in the next few days, because I think you will, because just by thinking about this, it's like your unconscious mind says you're ready. Maybe your ego says you're ready. I'd love to know what ideas you've got. I'm not going to pinch them, obviously, but I'd love to know what type of ideas you got and how you became thoughtful of them, how you mused them, how you let it incubate maybe for those 24 hours, how you found the intention, And what was so important that you decided to take that responsibility and choose wisely to do that thing, or when you chose not to do it? I'd love to know. Maybe I'm being a bit nosy, but if you could satisfy my nosiness, just email me. Feedback, I'll say that again, feedback@personaldevelopmentunplugged.com. Personal email. Get nothing lost or whatever. It only comes to me, and you get my personal reply, as people will vouch for it. So please do that and enjoy every heartbeat. And remember, you, the unconscious mind, not only to surprise them for feeling, well, to feel happy for no reason, but also maybe have that idea, those intuitions start to come a little more often, more regular. I wonder what that'll be like. Anyway, enjoy every heartbeat. Until the very, very next time. I'll be with you then. This is Paul Clough, Personal Development Unplugged.com, trying to break down the complicated into easy, simple ways of just becoming a success. Enjoy. Well, I hope you enjoyed that podcast, because this is me, Paul Clough from Personal Development Unplugged, where I'm just trying to deconstruct, as they call it, deconstruct the complicated so we can make life easy and richer. So our return on the effort and investment that we put in is magnificent. And you can have fun doing it. That's the main thing. Have fun and getting better each time. So if you enjoyed this episode or any other episode, very first thing I'd love you to do would be to pay it forward and share it with anybody and everybody you know. Wouldn't it be fun if you just sent it to everyone you knew? That would be fun, because that's the way of this integrated field of learning where we just share everything we know. Someone will get the golden nuggets. They will, and their life will change, and you'll be the cause of their life changing. That would be awesome. Secondly, if you could just subscribe, because subscribe buttons do help. They help you to get the episodes on your platform of choice when they come out. No problems. You don't have to think about it. Off they come, ping, you get it. That would be awesome, because that helps with just the rankings in all those platforms. But also, if you ever get a chance, maybe just a little review. Hopefully it would be a 5-star review if you're putting a review up. But a nice review would be good. Again, that helps the ratings, which means if people get to see it because it's been rated better, it means they've got a chance to take the little golden nuggets that you would have shown and shared, and they get to get better too. And in all of that, we're doing 2 wonderful things. One is we're doing things that are good for you, they're good for others, and good for little old planet Earth. And secondly, we're leaving everybody and everything in a better place than when we first met them. And that includes little old planet Earth. Okay? Anyway, until next time, enjoy every heartbeat. Bye-bye.
Warning, you are now leaving the unplugged mind of Paul Clough. It's time to fly on your own. Be brave, my friend.
Personal Development Unplugged.